Ella had always been resilient, ever since she was young. Now, as a single mother of two small children, that resilience is tested every day. Her days begin before the sun rises, getting the kids ready for school, managing the house, and dealing with a job that, while it provides for them, also drains her. Every working hour feels like a weight on her back, but her love for her children drives her to keep going. She wants to give them a safe life, but at the same time, it feels like something is slowly slipping through her fingers. In the stillness of the night, while she watches her children sleep, Ella feels a void. The physical exhaustion is immense, but the emotional fatigue is even greater. She realizes that, although she is physically present, she is emotionally distant, consumed by financial worries and the constant sense of inadequacy. Am I doing my best, or am I just surviving? She wonders. With each new day, that doubt grows. One day, during a conversation with a longtime friend, she heard about a monk who lived in a distant temple. Monk Jin, her friend said, helps many people find peace in the midst of chaos. He doesn't give you answers, but asks questions that guide you to them. That conversation sparked something in Ella. Although she had never been a religious person, there was something comforting about seeking advice from someone so wise and serene. Without thinking too much, she decided she had to make this journey. She didn't know what she would find, but she felt she had no other choice but to try. Deep down, Ella knew it wasn't just the burden of external responsibilities consuming her. The heaviest weight came from within. Now, for the first time, she felt ready to face it. Ella sits in front of Monk Jin. The surroundings of the temple are silent, almost as if the world had slowed down so she could, for a moment, find peace. The serenity on the monk's face is unshakable. He observes her attentively, but without judgment, as if he already knew the answers before Ella even asked her questions. Ella takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she's carried up to this moment. "I'm tired," she says, her voice trembling, reflecting years of exhaustion. "I work every day, trying to make sure my kids have what they need, but I feel like I'm failing. No matter how hard I try, it always feels like it's not enough. I'm thinking about getting a second job. Maybe that will help." Monk Jin tilts his head slightly with a gentle smile and responds with a simple question. "What are you looking for with this second job, Ella?" Ella hesitates. It wasn't a hard question, but something about the way he asked it made her pause. After a moment, she answers, "More money, more security. Maybe if I can pay all the bills without worrying so much, I can relax a bit." The monk remains silent for a moment before asking another question. "And what would bring you this security you're seeking?" Ella bites her lip. The answer seemed obvious, but at the same time, something inside her said there was more to it than it appeared. "I guess security means not worrying anymore, knowing that my kids are okay, that they won't lack anything." She stops talking, as if processing her own words. "But even so, I feel like there's always something missing." Monk Jin smiles again, a smile that carries the wisdom of many years. "Do you have financial security now?" "In a way, yes. I can support the household, but then why do you think a second job would bring the security the first one didn't?" That question hit Ella like a gentle but deep blow. She had never thought about it that way. Would a second job really solve her concerns, or would it just be another way to try to fill something that couldn't be filled with work? "Maybe I believe that if I do more, things will get better. Maybe I think that by working more, I'll be proving I'm enough for them." Ella's voice begins to falter. "But I feel like the more I give, the less present I am." The monk nods slowly and, with a soft voice, asks her, "And what if the real security you're looking for doesn't come from the work you do, but from the presence you offer?" Ella feels a lump in her throat. His words weren't an immediate solution, but they planted a seed in her mind. It was the first time someone had made her think that perhaps the problem wasn't the amount of effort, but the direction in which the effort was being placed. Silence settles between them again, a necessary pause for Ella to reflect. The soft sound of the wind passing through the trees around the temple is the only thing heard as Ella remains silent, absorbing the monk's words. She still feels the weight of exhaustion in her body, but something inside her starts to shift, as if old memories were being gently awakened. Monk Jin observes her expression and, after a few moments, calmly asks, "Ella, Do you remember a time when your children smiled at you? A genuine smile, full of joy? Ella furrows her brow slightly, surprised by the simplicity of the question. She thinks for a moment, and then, almost involuntarily, a memory surfaces. Yes, she replies with a sigh. I remember an afternoon when we were at the park. I had finished work early that day and decided to take them out to play. My kids were running across the grass, laughing non-stop. We were lying together on the grass and the sun was beginning to set. They looked at me with those bright eyes. In that moment, I knew they were happy, not because of something I bought, but just because we were together. Monk Jin nods slowly, his calm gaze remaining fixed on Ella. And how did you feel in that moment, Ella? She closes her eyes for a moment, reliving the sensation. A small smile appears on her lips. I felt whole. Like, for a brief moment, everything was in place. There were no worries, no pressures. It was just love. The monk smiles softly. What was necessary to create that moment? Was it something you bought? Something you gave them materially? Ella shakes her head, a thoughtful look in her eyes. No, it wasn't any of that. It was just me, being there, present. Monk Jin pauses, allowing Ella to process her own words before continuing with an even deeper question. And how many of those moments do you think you've missed because you were too busy with what you think you need to do? The question makes Ella feel a tightness in her chest. She remembers all the times she arrived home late, exhausted, just to put her kids to bed without even asking how their day went. All the small opportunities for connection that somehow slipped away. I think many. Maybe more than I'd like to admit. Her voice trembles slightly, overtaken by emotion. I always thought I was doing my best for them by working so hard, but now it feels like I'm sacrificing the moments that matter most. The monk tilts his head, with the patience of someone who has realization countless times, but knows it is unique for each person who discovers it. What is most important to your children, Ella? What do you think they will remember when they grow up? Ella feels a tear roll down her cheek. The monk's words touch on a truth she had been ignoring for a long time. They'll remember me. Not the money, not the things, but me, how I was with them, the times I smiled with them. She pauses, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I think I always knew that, but I was so afraid of failing that I lost focus. Silence settles once again, but this time it's not the silence of weight. It's a silence of understanding, of discovery. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew something had changed. Ella was beginning to realize that perhaps the emotional presence she was so concerned about providing through material security was actually something much simpler, and at the same time, much deeper. Monk Jin watches Ella's expression, seeing the storm of thoughts brewing inside her. With a serene look and a soft tone, he pauses before beginning his next reflection. Ella, have you ever tried carrying a heavy stone for a long distance? Ella seems surprised by the question. She slowly shakes her head. No, not that I can remember. The monk smiles slightly. Imagine for a moment that you're carrying a very large stone. At first, it might seem manageable. You adjust the weight on your shoulders, try to keep your balance. But as time goes on, the stone begins to feel heavier. Each step becomes harder, your legs ache, your back bends. You keep carrying it without questioning why, until finally you reach your limit. He pauses briefly, observing how Ella reacts to the image. Ella listens intently, as if the story is speaking directly to her life. Now, imagine that along the way, you meet someone who asks you, "Why are you carrying this stone?" And in that moment, you realize you don't know the answer. Maybe this stone isn't even yours to carry. Or if it is, maybe you don't need to carry it alone. Ella furrows her brow, absorbing the meaning behind his words. What if you could let go of that stone, Ella? The monk asks gently. What would happen if, for a moment, you allowed yourself to set aside some of the stones you're carrying? Ella remains silent, her mind processing the metaphor. She had never thought of her responsibilities in that way before. In her mind, every task, every worry was something that needed to be solved, something she had to carry. But now, she was beginning to wonder, are all these stones really mine? She hesitates, searching for the words. I don't think I've ever stopped to think about it. I always believed it was my duty to carry everything, to fix everything. I'm not sure if I can let go of these stones, Monk. Monk Jin tilts his head with endless patience. Many times, we carry burdens we believe are ours, but in reality, they belong to others. Or worse, some burdens simply pile up over time, and we carry them without ever questioning why we began to carry them in the first place. He looks at her gently. But Ella, have you ever asked yourself, which of these stones are truly yours? And which can you finally leave behind? The words echo within Ella, awakening something new. Which stones am I carrying? She thinks about the bills, the extra work, the sleepless nights. She also thinks about the guilt, the fear of failing as a mother, the constant feeling that she's never doing enough. And for the first time, she wonders, do I need to carry all of this alone? Ella closes her eyes for a moment, feeling the symbolic weight of the stones she's been carrying for so long. There was something freeing in the idea that maybe not all of them were hers to bear. Something inside her begins to loosen. Maybe I can let go of some of them, she murmurs, more to herself than to the monk. But how do I know which ones to let go? The monk, with a sparkle in his eyes, watches her with the calmness of someone who has walked that path before. That, Ella, is the question you must ask yourself. Not all the stones are yours, and the ones that are, you don't have to carry alone. But the decision of which to keep and which to let go is one only you can make. Ella feels a sense of relief wash over her, as if for the first time, she begins to understand that the path to balance wasn't in carrying more stones, but in learning to let go of some. Ella sits in silence for a long moment, absorbing everything Monk Jin had said. The symbolic weight of the stones she carried now felt more real, but something was changing within her. There was a new understanding, a sense of relief beginning to form. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine that she could let go of some of these responsibilities, that she didn't need to carry the entire world on her shoulders. Monk Jin, observing Ella's moment of introspection, speaks again, this time with a soft, almost paternal tone. Ella, you've said you want to be the best mother for your children, that you do everything for them. But what do you think would make them happier? A mother who silently carries the weight of the world? Or a mother who is present, balanced, and knows when to ask for help? Ella feels the words hit her heart. She thinks of the countless times she believed she was doing the best by taking on more responsibilities, by handling everything on her own. But now, faced with this new perspective, she sees how far that had emotionally distanced her from her children. I always thought that if I were strong enough, they would never have to carry anything. But now, she pauses, searching for the right words. I think, in trying to protect them from everything, I distanced myself from them. The monk looks deeply into her eyes, conveying compassion in his gaze. What if real strength, Ella, wasn't in carrying everything alone, but in knowing when to let others share the burden with you? Your children don't need you to be perfect. They need you, with all your imperfections, with all your humanity. Ella feels a new emotion stir within her. It was as if a veil had been lifted from her eyes, as if for the first time she realized that the solution wasn't in doing more, but in allowing herself to do less, in asking for help, in accepting that the perfection she had been striving for was, in fact, unnecessary. I've never asked for help. I always thought that if I did, it would mean I had failed somehow. Ella's voice trembles, but there's a lightness to it, as if the confession itself was already starting to lift the weight from her. Asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, Ella. It's an act of courage. Life was never meant to be lived alone. Carrying the weight of all those stones on your shoulders will only distance you from the things that truly matter. The monk pauses before continuing, letting his words resonate. If you could set down some of these stones, if you allowed yourself to accept help, what do you think would change in your life? Ella reflects deeply. She thinks of the friends who had offered support and the opportunities she had turned down because she believed she needed to handle everything alone. And above all, she thinks of her children, the joy she once shared with them, which had lately been overshadowed by exhaustion and worry. I think I'd be more present, lighter, maybe even happier. She exhales, as if each word releases a bit of the weight she'd been carrying for so long. And maybe I could be a better mother that way. The monk smiles gently, his final words echoing with clarity. Being a balanced and present mother is the greatest gift you can give your children. Letting go of some of these stones doesn't mean you love them any less. In fact, it will allow them to have the mother they need, one who is truly with them, in heart and soul. Ella feels a new lightness in her chest. The path ahead was still far from clear, but something had shifted. She was beginning to realize that the strength she had been seeking wasn't in her ability to do everything on her own, but in her ability to recognize her own limitations and open herself up to support. The weight of her burdens was beginning to lift, little by little, and in its place, a new sense of balance and inner peace was starting to blossom. The silence in the temple felt deeper now, almost palpable. The soft wind continued to blow through the trees, but to Ella, the sound was different, lighter. She looked at Monk Jin, feeling a quiet gratitude for the clarity his words had brought. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe without the suffocating weight of responsibilities she had accumulated for so long. Ella stood up slowly, as if adjusting to this new sense of lightness. Monk Jin remained seated, serene, watching her with the same wise and understanding gaze that had guided her from the start. "I understand now," Ella said, her voice firm but filled with emotion. "I always thought that being strong meant carrying everything on my own. But now I see that being strong also means knowing when to let go, when to ask for help. My children need me, not my endless effort. They need my presence." The monk smiles gently, his eyes shining with approval. "Every stone we carry has a purpose, Ella. Some help us grow, others teach us the importance of letting go of what no longer serves us. By releasing the ones that aren't essential, you make room for what truly matters." Ella takes a deep breath, feeling the metaphorical weight of the stones lift from her shoulders. There was peace there, a sense of clarity that had once felt so distant. She didn't know exactly how life would unfold from here, but she knew she was on the right path, and most importantly, she knew she wasn't alone. Monk Jin stands as well, and with a calm gesture, he points to a small stone on the ground at Ella's feet. "Pick up this stone, Ella. Hold it for a moment and then let it fall, as a symbol of what you've chosen to leave behind." Ella bends down, picks up the stone, and feels the cold weight in her hands. She holds it for a moment, reflecting on everything it represented: the sleepless nights of worry, the fear of failure, the pressure of being everything for everyone. With a deep sigh, she bends down again and places the stone on the ground. As she lets it go, something inside her releases as well. "I'm ready to move forward," says Ella, looking at the monk with a smile she hadn't felt in a long time. "I don't need to carry what isn't mine anymore." The monk nods, satisfied with the transformation before him. "Go lightly, Ella. And remember, whenever you feel the weight building up again, you have the power to decide which stones to carry and which to let fall." With one last grateful look, Ella walks away from the temple, feeling the warm sun on her skin. Each step felt lighter, as if she was finally walking with life rather than being dragged by it. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but now she had a new perspective. Ella leaves the temple not as the exhausted mother who had arrived, but as a woman at peace with herself. Her journey wasn't over, but the first step toward balance had been taken. And that, she knew, would change everything. If Ella's journey touched your heart and made you reflect on your own search for balance, don't forget to give a like to support the channel. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep following more stories and self-awareness tips that can transform your life. And share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Together, we can spread more empathy and balance.